Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Joppe Venema, and I'm a Dutch artist and publisher. But before I start my lecture, I would like to also thank Ellen de Haan for inviting me and everybody else involved at Fanzine Festival. So today I'm going to talk about my publishing project called Vaneen. And Vaneen comes from it means in Dutch from one. And this actually, I chose this name because I wanted to make a kind of platform where not only I could publish music or art, but everything could exist under the same umbrella. But then I started off, publishing my own work, and then later on it became more broader in that sense. And then in combination with printed matter, Vaneen also releases special editions. So usually that it's paired with a certain release. There's an artwork, or there's like something that contributes to the release. And then on top of that, Vaneen also organizes events for release parties. And then next slide, or first slide, and then then next slide. So this is the first publication that Vaneen published, and it's a publication by me called Postcard Drawings. It's made in 2016, so 5 years ago now. And it's a very straightforward, simple book. It's a collection of postcards, drawings on postcards, and I made it myself. And it was nice that with the actual book you could also get the original drawing. And this is something that I wanted to continue doing with making publications, that you get the original drawing together with the publication. Next slide. And here you see the postcards, and this book was also available at Ellen, her shop, and that was also nice that she supported me in that way. Next slide. The second release was a more ambitious project. This I made during the first year at Minerva. It's a book with around 300 drawings. And as you can see on the cover, there's a man drawing his own arm, and this arm becomes like a road. This was kind of illustrating what I wanted to do with this book, is that I wanted to find my own kind of signature handwriting or my signature drawing style. So I designed the book in a particular way that you didn't see my name on the front, but all the names on the back were the names of artists that actually inspired me when I made this book. And for a period of 9 months, I just was just looking at a bunch of different artists and exploring a lot of different techniques and drawing styles. And then behind the sleeve, you would see all the information of this book and my actual name. So at first hand, you wouldn't really know who actually made this book, and I thought that was kind of nice. And it was published 1 year later in 2017. Next slide, please. And here you see the inside of the book. Next slide. And before I'm going to talk about this release, I would first like to play a little snippet of this cassette. So what you just heard was a track from System Under Test, also known as Jan Wiersema. The track was called Redirect Novox. And Jan Wiersema I actually met through a friend of mine, because she was telling me about her father and that her father was playing music for almost all of his life. And when I visited his house, I got to know his whole archive of music, and I was really fascinated by the broad range of genres that he was playing. So that these genres were like witch house and techno and noise and dark wave, and I really wanted to bring all of those different genres all together in this compilation cassette. So this cassette covers the music from Jan Wiersema from 1990 to until 2016. Besides that, he never actually shared his music outside of his family or even performed live before. So it was really like genuinely made just for himself. So that's also something I really liked about publishing, is that you can push someone or give someone an extra kind of platform to take his or her work more seriously. Next slide. So then for the second and third release, I organized an event here in Groningen at Y2, it's called. It's an exhibition space, and they also have artist studios there. For this release party, I made an exhibition of all the drawings that were in the second release of Pilgrim. And then I asked System Under Test to perform live, and so that was his first live performance in his whole life. And then besides that, Marcel Imtorn, also a Groningen-based musician, was playing, and Pijoyo, and there was an audiovisual installation by my brother and music by Red Brut. So I really tried to make it as festive as possible. But yeah, for this exhibition, or when I showed all my drawings, I also wanted to make a kind of lottery system. So I had this magician hat in the middle of the space, and then you could get this scratch card out of it, and then when you would scratch the card, there would be a number, and this number would then be a specific drawing. So you could literally win a random drawing for like €3. So yeah, this kind of the original paired with the reproduction continued in that way. Next slide, please. The fourth release of Vaneen is with a bunch of different artists. Margaret Böhme, she is a German abstract expressionistic painter. Klaus Goldman, he is a cosmic horror filmmaker, but he also occasionally draws. And there's Jabez Gorley. He is a puppeteer that started puppeteering from a very young age, but then later on he started focusing on mask making. And then my brother also participated. He is an artist currently living and working in Rotterdam, and then myself. And the title of this publication is called False Friends, and false friends comes from the French word faux amis, and it's a term that describes two words that have a very similar pronunciation in two different languages. So an example is magazine in English and magasin in French, which means shop. And this we thought it was a nice way to actually trick the viewer, so it's not actually what it seems like. And that's why we also wanted to have the mask as the cover, because all of these names are just made up names, and we were trying to find all of these pseudonyms that we can work on there. So me and my brother, it's just basically work of me and my brother, but we were working with our own archive that is actually very different and distinct from all the other work that we're doing. Next slide. So an example is on the right you see a drawing by Klaus Goldman, which is then the horror filmmaker. And yeah, my brother started making, when he was started making art, he made those very dark black and white drawings, like kind of morbid. And later on, I think also because he has a child right now, he started making very colorful work. So that's kind of funny. But yeah, and then on the left there is a drawing by me. And what we thought was nice about this term false friends, or actually working under a pseudonym, is that you can almost liberate yourself from not making the same kind of work all the time, because the art market is very much pressuring that you have to have a distinctive, recognizable style, and that you easily sell work in that way. So we kind of try to get around that. Next slide. This is a publication by Julia Dahi-Hong. Julia Dahi-Hong is a Canadian artist with a background in photography. Currently Julia makes sculptures and installations, and she's also writing. And on top of that, she's organizing Breakfast Bee reading series. And this book is actually is a collection of drawings, and this is very different than the works she usually makes in her artistic practice. So when I saw these drawings a few years ago, in 2018, I became really fascinated by them, because I saw a connection with her writing style, but she never really considered this as part of her practice. So then I pushed her to make a book out of it. And next slide. Yeah, so this is an example of these drawings. They're very minimal, a little bit surreal, funny drawings, I think to kind of seek value in something that she wouldn't actually see as valuable, or as valuable in her own artistic practice, was nice to actually publish that. Next slide. And then we made a special edition. These are all different ceramic book stands that came with the publication, that Julia also made herself. Next slide. For this book release, I organized a book presentation at Forbidden City, which is an exhibition space and concert venue in Antwerp. And then on the opening evening, Capello and Carrageenan was playing. Next slide. And Julia made a very nice drawing on the window at Forbidden City, and this is someone holding a candle in another one's ear, which is supposedly earwax treatment, but I have no idea if it actually works. Next slide. And after the publication of Julia, 1 year later in 2019, we started collaborating on a book called I Wonder What Everyone Is Thinking About in Line at Albert Heijn. It's a crossword puzzle book, at the end of the book there is a story with a lot of blank words, and then once you finished all the crosswords, you can just complete the story at the end of the book. But for this occasion, Julia and I recorded the story together, so I would like to play that right now.
What is everyone thinking about in line at Albert Heijn? Once again, it's that time of the day, just 2 hours before closing, and everyone rushes into this
supermarket.
It's impossible to find any
blue
shopping baskets, and I'm forced to take the children's shopping cart. While my upper body bends forward at a 45-degree angle, I pass the security guard, and he silently chuckles under his own breath. The
crystal
clear glass of the
refrigerator
displays the
white
selection of pre-cut
vegetables,
and I am convinced that an actual meal can be cooked without using a single
knife.
Looking to the
right, fruits
from all 4
seasons
are available, and some fruits, such as
mangoes,
are labeled
ripe.
every
Thursday, chicken
is on promotion, and I find this meat here to be quite strange. The poultry from the supermarket has a distinctive
taste.
that is difficult to describe. I continue to
Walk
down the aisle. I passed by a
broken
jar of mayonnaise that no one seemed to
care
about, not even the.
employees.
Soon my eyes fell upon another promotion, the
Infamous
bonus.
croissants
I take a closer look, and almost every croissant is
attached.
to one another, creating a sense of
Claustrophobia.
within the plexiglass display and beyond. I continue towards the
Wine,
selection, and I already see a queue creeping towards the end of the
frozen foods.
aisle. The long wait results in many people standing in a row, periodically pushing their baskets with their
Feet,
as if they were trying to
kick,
a heavy.
football,
Looking around, I see many people that have nothing to do with each other, standing around all together for the same reasons. People seem to take this moment for themselves, to think about their lives and perhaps
evaluate,
their personal levels of happiness. The funny thing is that nobody is able to hide their faces. What I see is how they are feeling. As I'm taking my time to observe the people in line, I notice my
empty,
children's shopping cart and that the supermarket is about to close in a few.
minutes,
This time, the security guard looks at me with
suspicious,
eyes as I leave with a
shopping list,
that should be full of words that have been crossed out.
Yeah, so that was the story that Julia wrote for this publication. And the crosswords are really, they're very child-friendly. Everybody can fill it in. Next slide. The seventh release of Vaneen is a book by mine called Manners Under the Table, and this was paired with an exhibition at Forbidden City in Antwerp. This book actually collects all of the research that I conducted for the exhibition, and this research was all around the ale brewster and cuckolds and witches and folklore and spirits and drunkenness, so a lot of different kinds of things, but it would also give it an insight into the exhibition. Next slide. And here you can see the inside of the book. So in combination with the research, I also made these drawings for it. Next slide. Then there was at the exhibition opening, there were a few concerts by Fiuk, an Antwerp-based musician, and Orphan Fairy Tale. And Gijs Dennens was DJing, but there couldn't be a DJ because it was not allowed for the venue to have DJs, so he just became Gmail. Next slide. And this is an overview of the exhibition. You can see next to the door I showed the publication, and next slide. These are two works that I showed, and on the left there is a work that is based upon the research that I was doing. So I was actually looking into the figure of the alewife, and that was someone, a woman who was making beer during medieval times. But making beer was a way to be financially independent, and on top of that, she was not married, so that was quite frowned upon, of course. So what I and how she was actually dressed was really it is quite characteristically known as what we now know as the witch. So when she would sell beer at the open market, she would always wear a very tall hat to be able to get recognized. And when she would sell beer at her house, she would always leave a broom in front of her door. So yeah, these are all these things that we now know as the witch, but actually in that time she was just trying to like sell her beer. And I thought that was really interesting. And then later on, she was also depicted in like doom paintings from that monks were making. So she was really seen as this evil person. But the only thing that she did is sell beer and she didn't have a husband, so she was not married. And then she was always getting accused of selling diluted beer, and so it was really really hard for these alewives to sustain themselves and not kind of left out from society. So that was like one of the main figures of the exhibition. And then on the drawing on the right, you see, I made this witch come out of the stove, and I was kind of fascinated how history can kind of haunt itself, and this history of the alewife is this complete transformation of what we now see as the witch, but we don't really connect it to the alewife. And there's also different kind of research about the becoming of the witch. So it's one kind of story of this, of course. And then what I made is a kind of peasant still life. So there's the wife pouring the beer, and then the man, I think, cutting some bread or something, and then in the back you see a man with these stag horns, and that is a symbol of the cuckold. But a cuckold is someone who is who is not aware of his wife cheating on him. So that's what they call a cuckold, and then that's the stag horns are a symbol of that. Next slide. This is another overview of the exhibition, and on the left I made a stove out of paper bricks, and there's also a pot on it, and then in the pot there is a chicken made out of bread. Next slide. So then the aid for this of Vaneen is a book by Daniel Pereira, and he is a writer based in Rotterdam. And actually this is the same kind of story as with Jan Wiersema, where he never showed his writing to anyone or published it. So when I read his writing, I thought it would be really nice to take it more seriously, or that he really would consider it as part of his practice. And in this book, it's a collection of experiences that he had in Lima in Peru when he was traveling there, because his family is living there. And then he describes very surreal kind of situations where there would be a bus full of people with flags, but then the people were not regular humans anymore, but they all became flags. So that is one of the examples of the story. Next slide. For the book, I also illustrated it with drawings, and in this case, you see the inside, the stars. Next slide. Then I made another cassette with Anton Lambert and Money. But before I'm gonna talk about this release, I'm gonna play a little snippet. So what you just heard is the music from Money, or also known as Guido Lahuis, and he is a Groningen-based musician. He usually invites friends to play his musical sets with, and so that could be a very long kind of drone crowd set, and then I think these friends usually don't know the actual instrument they're playing, but it's quite straight to the point because they usually play like one tone. And then so Anton Lambert and Money, or Guido, they never met because Anton he lives in Antwerp, and their music complements each other, but they're quite different as well, because Money is very it's very rhythmic, very much the same all the time, and then Anton Lambert is they're more like field recordings. Next slide. So for the release, I made a sculptural cassette. Instead of printing it, I just wanted to make something out of epoxy and resin, and every copy would be completely different. I'm first gonna play something by Anton Lambert right now. So that was a little snippet from Anton Lambert, and he studied double bass at the conservatory in Antwerp, and in his free time he usually makes electronical compositions. Next slide. Then there was a Vaneen label evening at Friday night in Groningen, where Money and Anton Lambert played. Daniel Pereira was reading his book, and Avi Olderrickert, Dutch artist, was taking care of the visuals. What was quite funny during this evening is that when Money was playing, Guido didn't have anyone to play the plant spot, so then Anton had to come upstairs and play the plant pot, but it was also just like ticking on the spot, so that was really funny to see. Next slide. And then the release that we made for this occasion is a release by Glorya Avgust, titled "Loose Ends Hiding in the Kitchen Drawers." And this is, I think, the most challenging release that I've made so far, or that we've made so far, because there were a lot of different components involved. What this release actually is this title comes from Glorya's performance that she did at the graduation at St. Lucas, because we've both studied together at St. Lucas in Antwerp, and we thought it would be nice to work with this performance and record it, but then turn it into something more musical. So that is what you see right here. What is USB? So then Glorya made a lot of different shells, and then inside of the shell there's a USB that you can plug into your computer, and then you could listen to the file. We thought that was the most suiting format for this release, because it's kind of. It still gives another layer to what this performance is about, and then paired with that there is a publication, and this publication are all of these drawings, and you can see here on the right this is the cover, and all of these drawings we laser cut it and use it as a stencil to emboss it into the paper, so it's almost like an invisible drawing embossed in the paper. And this suits really well with what the performance is also about. Next slide. And these are two more examples of the drawings that we embossed into the paper. And yeah, I think it really makes sense that we chose for this kind of technique, and because all the other releases of Vaneen are kind of straightforward. They either are Riso or just digital prints. And for this release, we thought it would be nice to have a little bit more of a kind of textural experience with the publication. And then it also comes with a sleeve that we silk screened. So yeah, it was quite a challenge to finish that all in time for this for this day. But I'm super happy to present it here. Then the next slide. So yeah, now I would like to conclude about what publishing means for me and why I started doing that and how it also relates to my own practice. I think for me what is really important about publishing is that I can step outside of my artistic practice and collaborate with artists that actually just that are my friends or that are in my direct surroundings. So that is really important for me, but it's also really important that I can invite someone to that I can give actually a platform to someone who hasn't had a platform before. So that goes for the cassette of Jan Wiersema, but also the book of Daniel. So that pushing the artist to publish something they don't value themselves as much as I do, maybe, I think is really important. And right now I would like to give it even more out of hand, because most of the releases they're quite I still have I still have a role in them, or I do the cover, or I would like to give it even more out of hand and just let the artist make a complete publication, as what I did with Glorya. So yeah, I'm hoping it will evolve more, and I'm also happy to be in Groningen because there's a lot of connection here with most of the releases that I published of Vaneen. So it would be nice to come back again here. I think that was it. Thank you. And I brought some releases, so if you're interested in one of the releases, feel free to come to the table and Ja, ik denk voor de volgende dat we ze dan nou zeg maar aan de presentatie zelf. Deze is ongeschreven. Deze is ook 8 en deze is die verkoop ik eigenlijk niet. Wil ik niet. Die is 25. Hier komt is
Yes, yes, you are right.
There are no takes. I like takes. Collect takes as well. They're probably those can sold out.
See, he had so.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a record player, a CD player, and a cassette player.
And you use them?
When I did my I listen to music endlessly, only full hours.
Had jij ook op de spreadsheet website de link nog weer aangepast?
Dat is yearning.
Ja, van vandaag? Dat is vandaag een nieuwe link. Nee. Oké, dat misschien niet. Dat is hetzelfde.
What do we have to do? Because Caroline takes care of that. Okay. Well, you can also make a story of the language. Just switch to the language. Want dat is de reden.
Nee, maar dan kan je zelf van niet aanpassen.
Ik heb ook wel...
A faint smell of sweat and cigarettes. I wasn't sure who invited you to the party, but then I remembered that I had left something in my backpack years ago and I purposefully forgot about it. You whispered, very quietly, I won't tell you exactly where we're going, but I can assure you it's not going to bite. We have arrived at the airport with my fear of another rejection weighing much heavier than my yearning to disappear into your depths. I reached for my keys, but along with my afternoon treat, I dragged my fine lines and secret desires for financial independence. Bag lady, bag lady, bag lady. Women urinating in bushes in the park. You scratched the destination for your curious fingers. Not very skilled, yet vigorous. My orifices are not kitchen drawers, I uttered with my voice cracking. I don't know where you were, but you did not listen and continued to stuff me like a turkey. I slide my hand down your inner thighs. I'm still learning how to touch. I don't feel prepared, but there's no way back. I find your squishy and crumbling inhabitants with my fingertips. Dirty secrets. Dirty secrets, which when heard, are not forgotten but forever kept behind oxidized locks. Your screams going deeper than the filthy crevice between sofa cushions. Sometimes I feel that my body is a victim of some impossible contract with my mind. Fresh roots stretching through the cracks of my tongue. Strangely, they like to be trodden on and trampled underfoot. Destroying them only makes them grow stronger. Amorphous, supple limbs coil around my neck, and my skin begins to mimic that of a plucked chicken. Swallow everything, my darling. 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 The girlfriend of the artist is performing tonight, and the audience's body wants to watch. Swallow her whole, like an oyster, without chewing. When it gets too real, which means she has lost control over her soft parts, embarrassment permeates the body, giving off an odor of dissatisfaction. To lubricate the body of the audience, she must reach the edge of risking humiliation, but without going over the skin that protects her. On a hot day, visitors, arriving both from the present and the past, without contempt, dip their sweaty limbs in the river in question. Is sharing her body a drag or a turn-on? Secrets perspire through the glands of their shared surface. Corporeal matter, scarcely recalling the ghost of its crowded body. Suddenly she was awakened by the loud cries of the vortex escaping through the seam drainage.
Hola, muchas gracias a todas por venir.
Hello, thank you for coming, thank you for
Me gustaría presentar a Josune Muñoz de Skolastika.
introduce you to Josune Muñoz from Skolastika.
Josune Muñoz es una filóloga vasca e investigadora que hace 12 años fundó Skolastika Servicios Literarios para estudiar y difundir la cultura y la literatura de las mujeres, con una metodología propia.
Women's culture and literature with a methodology of her own.
Hoy Josune también es reconocida como crítica literaria feminista y especialista en cómic.
Literary critic, and she's also specialized in comics.
Actualmente investiga y analiza el fenómeno de las series de televisión desde la crítica literaria feminista y el papel de las mujeres en ella. Además, también ofrece formación en centros de enseñanza públicos. Josune forma parte del proyecto de Skolastika, como he dicho. Ahora solamente agradecer mucho a Josune aceptar la invitación al Esprit de zinefest y muchísimas gracias también a el servicio de interpretación en inglés, de la traducción. Y nada, os dejo con Josune y espero que disfrutéis mucho de esta charla. Muchas gracias.
Hello, good afternoon. Hello, everybody, all of you there, out there. Would like to say thank you to the festival for this opportunity to show all the information, all the names, and all the pictures, all the images of women's creation in the comic scene in general, in the fanzine scene in particular too, and in the feminist fanzine scene too. I prepared a presentation, a talk on history, intending to show you the parallel road, the parallel way traveled by women in the feminist movement and in the fanzine scene, by specifically analyzing and showing you images and pictures of basic fanzines dating back to the 70s, 80s, and 90s. This is a talk with pictures, and therefore I shall share my desktop with you and show you pictures, a few images which I hope will have an influence on you as they did on me, with a view to enriching your gaze.
Muy bien. Here we go. I will need
Someone to confirm you can see my PowerPoint. Can you see it? Yes? Okay. Perfect then. As I said earlier, in this historic tour, we are going to move about from the Western world, and we're also going to see the influence of some images upon other images for you to understand our history and for you to get to know the different trends and you have seen so far when fanzines about feminism come to mind and feminist fanzines come to mind. There are quite a few traits that are repeated since 1762. Oddly enough, one of the first materials of desktop publishing, as we say today, takes us to London, to the 18th century, to
a figure, to a person, to an author called Mary Darley. She published the first manual for drawing caricatures. As you can see, she includes simple exercises for you to draw a caricature in a space of her own. Mary Darley is my first author in my talk. She had her own printer workshop. She had a shop where she could produce and sell the pictures she created together with her husband. Her images, her pictures, followed the techniques at the time, but her images were always ironical, critical. There was a lot of humor to them. These pictures criticized fashions and trends, as you can see, social developments, and the upper classes, the better off. Here we see a picture created by Mary Darley. On the right-hand side, we see Mary Darley herself with one of those pictures in her hand. She is the author of such a picture. And here we see a picture that was sold in a fashion of comic strip, which is, you know, so modern. The picture is so modern if we think about it. You know, these pictures about women and men. In color, we see the main characters. In a caricature, these gentlemen are buying their own caricatures in a London shop. This is an 18th century picture, and it includes almost all elements characteristic of a modern comic. So she's pioneer of fanzines and comic too. We are talking about 18th century women. We're talking about feminism too in my talk. This is the time of the first feminist wave, the Enlightenment feminism. Pamphlets, one-page leaflets, pages with information and drawings are part of the feminist movement right from the first wave, as you can see. Throughout the 19th century, it is more and more common for women to come together in women's clubs with magazines that have very few pages at the beginning, but surely and slowly but surely they start including pictures defending their own women's claims and their demands for society. Let's move on to the 19th century, and let me introduce you to another author who is definitely impressive, or she is, at least to me, Mary Duval, an English author, again, together with his husband. This is a bit of a pattern. Women who had so many obstacles to gaining access to discourses in public spaces sometimes lean and rely on a male figure who has undoubtedly easier access to public spaces for them to be able to present their own materials, for her or their materials to eventually get published. Creativity, originality is present in Marie Duval's works. Marie Duval published a magazine, Alice Lopez. You can see the character, black and white. He reminds me of characters century later, in actual fact. She uses the resources available at the time, images and pictures with a lot of humor, very, very critical, very close to caricature, but really expressive and really powerful. Alice Lopez's character was one of the first characters with their own merchandising, if I may say so. For instance, on online websites where antiques are sold, we can find coins, mugs, tea mugs, and other things created with her character. Ali Sloper was really successful in the late 19th century. In that period, widows were allowed for the first time to become owners of printing workshops, for instance, and the development of techniques for the reproduction of pictures and images allowed both men and women to have access to images and pictures in a much easier manner. The fact that many women could actually stay present in the market and produce graphic materials and magazines contributed to increasing the number of women who worked in that trade, and they started to add newer materials to support their feminist claims. The feminist movement is characterized by
panfletos y fanzines.
The great number, by a great deal, of pictures and fanzines to get close to women. Well, they were intended to get close to everybody, but most particularly to women, for them to know what their claims were, for the demands to be circulated, for their criticism to be circulated, because the patriarch's discourse in actual fact made women look ridiculous and ludicrous by saying they were fighting against men, they were really evil, because what they actually wanted was to leave their homes. This is an example of these booths where women could actually hand out the leaflets and the fanzines. I found different historic pictures where we can see feminists handing out leaflets, manifestos. Most interestingly, in the second feminist wave, which is the one I'm showing you now, the suffrage one, well, a huge number of images were created to illustrate women's claims and their longing for social change. These pictures were handed out to others, and they were usually part of collections of postcards. We can see some examples here. The features that we see on these postcards are really marked and obvious. They include women as girls or young girls or teenage girls supporting the feminist movement. It was a way of taking the feminist movement to younger women and make their claims more obvious within society, including women of all ages. In addition, the pictures also showed their achievements and the width of the feminist movement. They showed the network of feminism, the network of the struggle by women. The pictures also illustrated how society, men's society, responded to the feminist movement, as we can see. As you can see in this picture, fanzines and images and pictures from the feminist movement started to have quite a few variables concerning contents, such as claims, critical positions, and humor. Feminism as a social movement is characterized and defined by getting close to those who come close to the movement. This is a feature of feminism that has been copied and replicated by many other social movements, but in actual fact, this was original to them. Let me explain. For the claims to be made more understandable, information is given and is always made available. Let me now move on to the third feminist wave. Now I shall focus on feminist fanzines in Spain by introducing you to Nuria Pompeya. Nuria was very particular author in a way. As you can see here at the bottom of the picture, she was the owner of a publishing house like Mary Duval and Mary Darley. Nuria Pompeya could publish materials that would have otherwise not been published in a publishing house because she was the owner. She had her own publishing house. She was a bit of an expert in publishing do-it-yourself. Nuria was able to publish very powerful, strong images and pictures because she was not going to be censored. She would publish materials herself. The materials I'm about to show you are really pioneering materials. These pictures are called maternazis. Maternazis is a tour to pregnancy. And let me give you a piece of information. This dates back to 1967. It is the premiere of feminist comics for Spain and for the whole Western world. In a way, speechless chronicle of a pregnancy, a description of pregnancy without words. At a time, pregnancy was an untouchable subject. Nuria Pompeya, and well, her works seem simple, look simple. You can see her sketches, her strokes are very simple, but she is indeed highly expressive. You know, it looks simple, it looks easy, an easy picture, and that very fact was very encouraging for other women who decided to draw too. Nuria also used the collage technique in her comics and in her drawings, as you can see, pictures within pictures. In 1967, as I said earlier, it was impossible to talk about pregnancies and being pregnant, and the picture in black represents the delivery of the baby. Maternazis is a series of 8 pictures. I've just shown you a few pictures for you to see that Nuria Pompeya's world has been
en general, pero en Euskal Herria, desde luego, como luego os voy a
scenes in Spain in general terms. The baby's here, baby has been born, and so we can see that little hand covering the pregnant woman's mouth, who became a mom, that representing everything that cannot be said, everything that cannot be said in 1967, when pregnancies were described and talked, everything was ideal, motherhood could only be described if it's wonderful.
Visibilizar hasta qué punto.
To visualize to what extent, well, society didn't really allow to narrate, to tell the experience of maternity is one of the claims of the next decade. Glorya Pompeya, as you see, was able to publish in her publishing house, and therefore she has been a master author of comics for many generations of women, because she, along her years of work, has touched all topics of feminist claim of the third and the fourth wave. That means you can see here an image claiming violence against women in strips that were narrated throughout an image, with one image, with two tones, an orange tone, which was giving it color. This one is in Catalan, another language of the Spanish state. And there is a comment of only 5 lines. Glorya Pompeya has another material called The Education of Palmira, La Educación de Palmira, showing how men and women, or girls and boys, are differently socialized. It's very pedagogical, because with very simple but also very efficient images, she tells how it is, the education in different genders. And now we reach the third wave of feminism, and as you see, always the feminist claims are accompanied with images, words. So the written claim, drawn, always accompanies the women movement from the beginning of the history of the feminist movement. Therefore, there has been many different publications with images and words, of course. Here you have a material published by the publishing house of Glorya Pompeya, and her husband, called Ganiker, as a surname, much more famous than her, of course, bring in the claims of American women, of the one there called second wave feminism. Here in Spain was the third wave, and it shows how the network is being opened, and the women of the Spanish states begin consuming the discourses and images of the American or North American women in a way that when the Franco dictatorship ends, Glorya Pompeya has already a graphic art with which she tells the situation of women in the Spanish state when Franco dictatorship finishes or ends. As you see, she creates these images with collage techniques, having images of other ages, other times, with a technique that in the Basque country was quickly assimilated and copied. To take into account that these are images from 1975, and the main character, the woman, tells which is the situation of women. You can see this 2-page image it shows how girls are being educated. Girls, they want to be with boys, but boys know or assume that girls are not like them, that they are subordinated objects, so to say, and that there are no women such as Michelangelo or Velázquez, so great thinkers. It shows not only where women or girls are, spatially, but also how boys are and how they're going to refuse. So the male society is going to refuse that women want to become part of that society of studying, having rights, of thinking. As you see here, we have women on the streets claiming, vindicating objectives and materials which are of the feminist movement. In the 70s, there will be different vindications or claims that will be shown or expressed throughout fanzines. In the United States, furthermore, fanzines are going to look or analyze the comic strips. The more male comic, the comic which produces superheroes. These images here, the women of this feminist wave, so the authors of comics, many of them have two ways of two different parties, so to say. They are in the comic movement, but also in the feminist movement. During some time, women which approached the underground comic tried to create comics together with men, but there is a great number of women which discovered that the male comic, which doesn't have any type of control on the contents, is very free, is very critical, but is also developing a lot of violence against women, and it's very difficult for them to share that space in the comic where they are shown in a very erotic way as objects. So they assume those images created by the male comic in order to, together with those women heroes, which were closer to the feminist movement, to create images of powerful women fighting for the rights. This here is an image that I like very much. I like to show it very much. Because this image by itself shows, it is from 1972, it shows the horizontality with which women were working. This is a group of women who, from the 80s on, joined together in order to create a magazine, a feminist magazine called Women Comics. These were fanzines, and as you see, these were self-published. And you could access them with a subscription or in different spaces of women. One of the main problems of the feminist party that it has encountered is that it had to find its own channel of distribution. Because not all spaces where the fanzines were would be open to the fanzines produced by women, because many men producing fanzines felt uncomfortable with the frankness and brutality of the feminism that the images contained in these feminist fanzines. These were very vindicating images. So this feminist fanzine started to distribute the different topics and thematics of the feminist fanzines. These were bought by mail, by subscription, but you could also find them in women marches, in the streets, in demonstrations of women where they improvised tables, where they sold very quickly those materials. I have experienced that. I've lived that in the vast country myself in the 80s and 90s. That still happens, and I think it still happens. Also in hospitals for abortions, in centers for the encounter or the meeting of women. And it's interesting for you to see that these women were meeting and were showing themselves the difficulty of having to share both the creation of the fanzines and also their maternity. So you see women here with babies, something very realistic. And Laura has brought her daughter to this meeting. You see, Laura, that traveling with your babies is being there, it's been around for a long time, also with the pets. And you see them here. These are the survivals of the women's comics 40 years afterwards. Women comics can be bought in full format. You have all magazines in an edition of not so many years ago. This production you can find online. Probably many of you already know the full women's comics. If you do not know it, it is a source of information, of images, which is unavoidable. It's great, it's fantastic. And please allow me to introduce you to someone who's essential, Tina Robbins. She's one of the mothers of the feminist comic and fanzine. She's still alive. We owe some of this knowledge to her, and she has been very influential in Europe. These are just some of the front pages of women's comics. As you see, they try to break with the canonical model of femininity of women. They were very appealing, but all these magazines inside were black and white. The love models also, and also the claims that had to do with divorce and abortion. These comics from the 70s touch all the topics of the feminist movement and every single vindication of women. These are very powerful images, having different drawings, different styles of drawing, very critical with a male model also. And they visibilize the feminine desire, the feminine sexuality, the lesbian desire, and other sensibilities. They're very, very LGTBI, very vindicating, and there are some moments where they're also full of color. We're speaking about some years where they were experimenting very much with the style of drawing, with the color. These were years of experimenting also with drugs. Women comics was very much against the system, claiming or vindicating how women were put aside of history, and also playing with different elements of the North American culture, as you can see here in this image. And also bringing in all topics having to do with women. We were speaking about maternity before, about abortion, about the period, but also and especially about desire, about the body, about pleasure. Women comics was very shocking, and it was very successful. And seeing that women joined together were able to produce quickly sexual materials, well, once they had a network for these images, for these fanzines to be distributed, many other women felt appealed to produce such materials, to create these new magazines, these new images. I'm speaking about Ali Gominski, woman Robert Room, and together with Diane Camille, as other magazines, and they call for solidarity and sorority. And they show the networks of women with very different styles of drawing, very personal, to see how much a different personality each drawing has. And please allow me to show you this image here, because this image is very similar to something that I'm going to show you now. There has been some magic between this talk and something that is happening right now in Skolastika. This is a feminist exhibition of the 70s, which shares images of this book together, or you cannot see it in this image, but there were these tables where they sold the fanzines, the feminist fanzines, trying to show what the feminist movement is claiming at that time. I'm speaking about the end of the 70s of last century. The influence of North American underground comic went into Europe very quickly. For 1976, Tina Robbins, one of the mothers of the underground feminist comic, helped a group of creators, French fanzine creators, to put forward feminist magazines, such as women comics.
Estado de mujeres. Qué cantidad.
Just note the very many women who are there on the list from the world of comics, of fanzines, but there were also illustrators, women who would do documentary features, films, photography. Feminist magazines had greater control than feminist fanzines. Apparently, as legend has it, France is the freedom of liberty, the country of liberty, of freedom. But Nana, this magazine here, was censored by the state in France. In these feminist pictures, sometimes the parody is the greatest possible means, because quite often we've been witnesses to women stripping, quite a few times, no doubt. But in 1976, this picture here, a man stripping, was very problematic. And in actual fact, it was censored, as you can see here. This woman here, who is next to the reader, shows that there is a man there on stage as an object of desire, which is the usual case for women. Here we see some pictures from that magazine. These magazines had a very, very attractive, powerful front page or cover, but then the pages inside were always black and white. Obviously, taking into account the situation of the industry at the time, the techniques used at the time, the way things were at the time. Nana touched upon all feminist topics at the time, and all those subjects that were not touched upon and which are addressed now, today, by women. More particularly, Nana was closed down by the French government with this issue, this magazine issue, which addressed incest and sexual abuse within the family. It was the very state that decided to close the magazine down. Of course, the women behind Nana continued publishing their materials in a fanzine format along solidarity networks. In fact, Nana was previously sold to those circles, to those networks, but it was a lot safer and for the magazine to be free if it would stay within the boundaries of such circles. Here we see an Italian magazine or fanzine from 1977, which is a first attempt of doing a study of the thinking of women. This material, which I'm showing you, is a pioneer of what Strongest does currently, or other authors who do graphic essays. These materials date back to 1977, 1976. They are simple, as you can see, but at the same time, they are very ambitious. They are intended to tell the story of the feminist movement at the time, of the past of the feminist movement too. They are doing something that is considered to be normal nowadays, namely to vindicate the figure of the witch as a wise woman, as a powerful woman, as a free woman. Those witches who represented 1970s women are really present in the imageries of fanzines, particularly in the Basque Country. Here we see an example from Spain, Totem or Totem Especial Mujeres from 1977. We can see how quickly the influence of the states, of the United States, reached Europe. Women in this new comic. This is the feature on the image we can see now. We can see the cover of a nana being copied by Spanish authors, Spanish illustrators and Spanish publishers copying their French equivalent. And we'll now see the translation. I'm going to pause a little bit now to tell you about it because it shows how women received it in the masculinized world of comic. This special issue of 1977 was the first and only issue of the magazine. I'm now reading. Let's make it clear, if we limited the publication of female publications, it was not because of their lower quality, but precisely because of the opposite. They are too advanced, too innovative. This statement, written by the person who writes the introduction, may sound ironical, but it was true. It was true. The men's comic world wouldn't do a similar anthology until 15 years later. This type of expressions without obstacles, this free expression done by women about what they thought about women's comics, made it clear for women that the way towards expression and freedom was self-publishing, or what we now call desktop publishing. And that was the case, actually. Desktop publishing, or publishing with women's publishing houses or feminist publishers. Those were the ways traveled by women for them to make their claims, using these very advanced and innovative images. It is true they were both innovative and advanced. The man writing this text was right. Women had been publishing pictures and images made by them, published by them, that were absolutely on the cutting edge, that were absolutely radical, that were absolutely free. Let me now show you a piece that has to do with the history of Spanish feminist comics and Spanish feminist fanzines. This piece, this work is by one of the pioneers of Spanish feminist comic, Carmina Vila. She is alive and she's watching us today. She is online. She is with us today. I suppose she's excited about it, and I'm sure she'll be delighted to listen to you later in the discussion. Well, one of the subjects that actually constrained women most was the reporting on violence. This was a constant slogan in feminist fanzines. It was always present for decades, but was a very sore point with this area of work. But women have worked on this subject, on violence, for decades. I am a specialist in pedagogies about violence exerted against women, and the most powerful materials that I know I have found in these types of comics and fanzines. This story is read from top to bottom. This story talks about sexual violence in the private sphere and sexual violence in the public sphere too. Women being raped at home and in the streets. We now know that women are victim to greater sexual violence at home in the private sphere to a greater extent than in the public domain, or at least a more physical violence. And let's have a look at this material. This is a feminist notebook. It's called Cuaderno Feminista. Its size and format is slightly different, as we can see, slightly elongated or wider because it's cheaper. It was cheaper. Cuaderno Feminista is inspired by Boston women, as you can see here. And at the end of the 70s, in the late 70s, the magazine format was not that easy to produce. There were other formats there that were cheaper, smaller formats, smaller setups that could be more attractive. And so these formats became more popular in the 80s and the 90s, the more horizontal format. Again, loads of humor, as you can see. These materials are defined by humor ever since Mary Darling in 1793. Well, let's move on now. This piece, which we can see here now, is the shed of the Women's Assembly in Biscay, or Vizcaya in Spanish, the main feminist group in the Basque Country. One of the most important ones. This is a photograph taken in the late 70s when those women in the assembly started participating in the town's festivities to make feminism more visible. The festivities of Bilbao are characterized by these types of marquees or sheds that make room for different events. These sheds, these marquees, include different events, and fanzines, magazines, leaflets were handed out there. Indeed, it was a meeting point for women, a space for women, for them to be able to sell and exchange their fanzines. This is a photograph of these women in the 70s in two of the main feminist demonstrations, abortion and divorce. Abortion was conquered first. In my personal view, in my opinion, men are involved in this topic too. And when attention had to be focused, on abortion, women were on their own. They had to continue fighting in the 1980s. Now let me show you something which was new and novelty, as fate had it. And this is a connection to today's talk. In fact, this month, in September, throughout September, and up to October the 6th, in the center of Bilbao town, an exhibition shows the feminist struggle in the Basque Country back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. This exhibition illustrates very nicely how fanzines finally found their own room in the history of the movement. The exhibition was put together by the Biscayan Women's Assembly, and it includes screens and panels, as you can see here, which very much look like those I showed you earlier from the 1970s. They illustrate how the feminist struggle was built. Apart from traditional publications and books, the panels also include the fanzines of the time, in such a way that when you walk about the exhibition, you can see the books, the magazines, their demands, the stickers too, and the fanzines that were published and read by women at the time. This is an example of what I'm telling you. It is an exhibition that illustrates the feminist movement, the way it occurred, the way it walks, apart from philosophy books, feminist theory books. Women created and used posters, stickers, placards, and many fanzines. You can see one here. They're all on display at the exhibition, and I am so happy this can be seen, because fanzines have a bit of an issue with history. Let me explain. It takes longer, much longer, for them to be included into collections. In other words, they can be lost a lot more easily. They can be overlooked a lot more easily, because fanzines sometimes are created out of pressing situations, out of urgency. They are made very quickly. They copy pictures from previous fanzines, because decisions are made just a week before the demonstration, and so they are published 3 days earlier, before a feminist gathering or a feminist demonstration, and that causes fanzines not to be durable, not to be kept and included in fanzine libraries. In the end, most fanzines, as you can see them, these are from the Basque Country, they are part of the Skolastika's collection, and for this particular exhibition, it was really interesting for women to share their own fanzines.
Aquí tenéis uno de los fanzines.
Here you have one of the fanzines of this exhibition, which particularly is called bilingual. I have to introduce another element here, which is the cultural claim, the linguistic cultural claim of the Basque Country. With this bilingual fanzine, for example, there was an oppression of gender, but also we have to take into account the linguistic oppression, because Euskera, the Basque language, is a minority language which had been repressed politically, institutionally, along the whole dictatorship of Franco. In a way that in the Basque Country, all fanzines, in many cases, were both in Spanish, so just in Spanish in both languages, or only in Euskera, the Basque language. Now in the 21st century, looking at those fanzines from the 70s, 80s and 90s, give us a historical look, overview over the feminist movement, on the history of fanzine, the history of comic, but also on the history of the Basque society and the Basque language. And this is something that we are very happy to be able to tell. How fanzine is beginning to be an object of analysis, a social analysis, a lot wider than it was before. It was just studied from time to time. So eventually, you see a fanzine here. This one that you can see in this picture, inside looks like this. Has one page in Euskera, in the Basque language, and another page in Spanish. One page in Euskera and a page in Spanish. This is the exhibition I was telling you about. You can visit it, and this would be a clear example of everything I've been telling about up to now. This fanzine, published by the Women's Assembly, not only explains what an abortion is, how to practice an abortion, it also explains women where you can go to get an abortion. All these fanzines are historical objects, because they show you how the organization of groups was in order to be able to have an abortion, where you could do it in the 80s, which was London. So the fanzine was telling you what steps you had to take if you wanted to have an abortion, which were the hospitals where you would, so they would receive Basque women, but in the end they received women of the whole Spanish state, even with the telephone numbers. This exhibition that I was telling you about is made with one of the archives having fanzines in the Basque Country. In the Basque Country, you can find 3 centers of documentation for feminist fanzines. One is the Fanzinoteca in the government of Navarra. The other one is Centro de Documentation Center of Women, which has made this exhibition, and the other one is Skolastika, which is the space I am directing. It also has an archive of historical feminist fanzines. See, here's an image of Glorya Avgust. The 8th of March, the day where women go out to the streets, historically in the Basque Country, but I imagine the whole of Europe, it has created a huge amount of fanzines that are delivered on this day, many of them for free, many of them made by different groups of women, each of them telling what this group is working at. In the 80s, as you can see here, the master continues. Many people have copied her, have used her images. We have the bad habits of not asking for permission. We would just take the images of Peña because for us it was a honor to use these images, but we also knew that she would agree on that. We young women would copy her images, we copied them, we glued them. And as you see, it's a common topic of the late 70s and 80s has to do with abortion. In all formats. They always were claiming for every right of women, the right for pleasure, for education, for abortion, for sexual freedom, to be able to choose any kind of vital election, so vital option. But we still did not have the law which allowed us to vote, so that was one of the main fights. We had it both in Spanish and in Euskera, the Basque language, for both communities. But also in Madrid, this is a feminist fanzine from Madrid, which again shows how many posters and images that continuously has been produced along history by the feminist movement. Here you can see again this main feature that I was speaking about that's still present in the Basque Country, which is the mix of both languages. Here it says, let's respond to the attacks. And you see, this is a fanzine from the Women's Assembly, which is pioneered in the fight against the violence against women. And as you see, it takes over that old edition by Marika, claiming the violence that women suffer both at home and on the streets, which is fascinating to see, to find how well together they combine comic, fanzine, feminist and fanzine, feminism and comic. You see how they have feedback one with the other. This is a very specific fanzine. In another of the great feminist groups, which is the lesbians. Lesbians, those women claiming every single right of women, all liberties for lesbian women. They have been very active in the Basque Country and in Spain with all types of images, very productive. They have been varying with the different possibilities of editing, of imaging, with photo composition, different graphic techniques. So, in a way that in the 90s, this one looks especially interesting for me. See, half of the page is in Euskera, It begins with Spanish, then goes on in Euskera, then follows in Spanish, finishes in Euskera, and it is an example of harmonic co-living between Spanish and Euskera, and which is in reality very difficult in the Basque Country. This fanzine is very special because it's not common in our culture, in our city, in our country, to have both Spanish and Euskera. These are languages which do not go together very much. We live through the situation of diglossia. Spanish language is the most powerful one. It's the one prevailing in every way, and this shows how creative the groups of fights, of feminist fights, were, and how they were bilingual. And here in this picture you can see the logo. This would be the shed tent. It is so big, it's in the center of the city. This woman with both arms high, it's called Marjaya. She's the main icon of the festivities of my town. And this is the group of feminist women. I'm around here, I'm not going to tell you where, but they took over an image of an author of English fanzines called Jackie Fleming. She had produced this image, which was quickly copied in Bilbao, and it has become, as you see, the main icon. You can see it in the shirts. And for 10 days, hundreds of women of the town wear this T-shirt having the image of feminist fanzine of this English author. And it also reached the streets. Within these 10 days, this space created by women, it was called Maniki, this shed, the fanzine becomes very important, and it becomes walls even. Many of the images of the fanzines along the year were transferred the walls, and they are shown in this shed, in this tent. And here in this space you can still find, so sell and buy feminist materials and feminist fanzines. Of course, the most influential author in Spain is called Maria Colino. Maria Colino created a new image of feminist young woman called Margarita. It's published by Autoeditoras. It's publishing house, a feminist publishing house in Madrid. And it was absolutely copied, reproduced in Spanish, in Euskera. It was in stickers, fanzines, banners. You can see here Jackie Fleming, Maria Colino, different images coming from France, pictures from Germany. So creativity of feminist groups creating the whole pack to go out to the streets was always very high, very dynamic. Maria Colino and her Margarita are very respectful, very breaking through also. She's probably the most influential author in Spain. Her art has had a great impact. You can see the image here. I thought it was important for you to see these images because Maria Colino had a technique which was of a very high quality. It was never seen before. She brought in a new aesthetics, a new way of making fanzines in terms of the impact of the image, black and white even. Maria Colino left us all astonished. Her work still shines, and this humor, which always accompanies women, as I said before. So Maria Colino created some postcards where she was making fun of the obsession of men, with their genitals. Very funny postcards. We women were laughing very, very much. And these were sold in sex shops. And you can still find them in the network. And they made her become the queen. Maria was the queen. It was especially important for the collective of women making fanzines in Skolastika. The work of Jeleton is a Canadian author. All this underground comic that was still being produced in North America came slowly, but it had a great impact. I suppose you know the work of Jeleton. It's in Spanish, it's in English, and please do not miss it. And you can also find here, we're 1996, and you can see here the first, so until 2 years ago, this was the only collective fanzine made fully in Euskera, in the Basque language. The problem that we have with researchers that we find is that it's difficult to find all these authors. They all sign with pseudonyms and nicknames. It has been possible, but it was very hard to find them. All these artworks, black and white, many different topics, touching different topics, with much humor, showing the period, for example, all these topics, as I said, that were the feminist movement was claiming. It is in Euskera, the Basque language. And please let me introduce you to Finnish, the Basque author who has been more influential, Maite Martinez de Arenaza. Nowadays, she directs a space of imaging in Bilbao called La Calle. You can find her in the network. These are images of these fanzines that afterwards would be shown in the tents, in the sheds of the women for decades. Maite Martinez de Arenaza was painting a great painting full of images, of the images of the fanzines, full of colors, and it filled the city with these images and these colors, and the hundreds of thousands of people coming to our festivities sooner or later saw these fantastic images, so appealing. Maite has created a feminist fanzine, Maite Martinez de Arenaza, one of the authors that has had a long history.
And here we have Marika, the author. I'd like to introduce you now. I've already introduced you to Maria Colino, Maite Martinez de Arenaza. I hope all these pictures, all these drawings help you have your eyes wide open. I hope you were all impressed and astonished by all these pictures because they are part of women's legacy and they do contribute a lot to culture and society. This is it from me. I told you how fanzines were always present in the feminist movement with the main topics: divorce, abortion, violence, etc. against women, and lesbianism. The streets are still filled with women, with texts and drawings. I don't know what the situation is in Europe or in other countries, but in the Basque country we are now amidst a very important moment, and young women are creating new images too. This is an image by a young author a year ago. And these are images produced by groups in Spain when a Spanish politician, Alberto Ruiz Gallardón, wanted to further constrain abortion rights. Women responded very, very quickly with their productions, with their very important creations that are fully creative and free and absolutely original. Thank you all. Thank you for your attention. We have a few minutes for questions, if there are any. I'll be pleased to answer them, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation. The floor is yours. If you want to ask questions, I'm sure there will be a question by you.
Josune, como de momento no se lanza la gente.
You can use the chat for questions if you want.
Josune, muchísimas gracias por tu maravillosa charla. ¿Me estás oyendo? No sé si me oye. ¿Me oye? No. Yes, the sound is off. The one of. Okay, Josune, ¿me oyes? Sí. Muchísimas gracias por tu maravillosa charla. Yo de momento no se anima a nadie, pero a mí me gustaría hacerte una pregunta un poco más personal sobre cómo surge tu interés por el mundo del cómic, del fanzine, y cómo era, ¿no? Si había alguna intención como de responder hacia un contexto que ¿no? donde machista, donde dominaba al hombre en el cómic, y como, o sea, ¿cuál fue tu interés, o cómo surge todo el proyecto de Skolastika? Un poco, bueno, esto es muy largo, pero brevemente.
To be able to do the work I do, in my case, there were a few factors behind it, if you know what I mean. On the one hand, I'm a feminist myself, one that hit the road, the streets, and I had my own collection of fanzines. And so when men would tell me women don't do comic, I knew that was a lie because I had comics at home. I had my own comics. And besides, when the degree on gender studies did not exist in the University of the Basque Country, one way of being educated in that respect was to rely on these publications, on fanzines. And there is another factor yet, a historic moment. I'm a literary critic, and I could see comic criticism was emerging. In my personal experience, if a critical canon, if a critical standard is created without women, without a feminist approach, then it's really difficult to turn it around, to change that. So I decided to start working on this because I needed women's contribution to be present right from minute one, right from the very, very beginning, so that the world of comic would not replicate the male chauvinist view in the world of literature. So I was lucky enough to be able to teach on that, in that, because I did have the comics, I had the materials, and it was the right time in history for me to do it. As I showed you, the loss would have been huge should the work not be represented in the world of comic and fanzines.
Hello, Josune. Thank you for your talk. There are no more questions anymore in the audience, but it was a really clear talk, and really nicely also with all the pictures and images. It was really nice. Thank you a lot.
You're welcome. Yo no sé si todavía puedes traducirme, Vicente, pero...
Can I be translated? Yes. Please remind the audience, well, I would like to remind the audience that Skolastika has a visual archive. All the pictures you saw are available to everybody. Skolastika sends the pictures you may need if you want to use them.
Muchísimas gracias, Josune.
Thank you, Josune.
Bueno, ha sido un gran placer escucharte y muchísimas gracias a la traducción de Elisa y Vicente. De verdad, gracias por haberlo hecho posible y nada, mucho.
And thank you to you. I would have liked to see you face to face, to see women's faces. It's so gratifying, so rewarding to see people's faces when they watch, when they see these very powerful, sometimes difficult images. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope they are stimulating enough to you.
Luego te mando unas fotos, Josune. A las 7 también empezará la charla de Autoeditoras con Gelen, Jeleton y Iurhi Peña sobre su archivo de fanzines feministas mexicanos. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias Gelen y Iurhi por participar en el festival, en este Sin Festival. Voy a presentar a Gelen y a Iurhi, que forman parte del colectivo Autoeditoras. Jeleton es una artista e investigadora, realizadora del archivo feminista Archivo Do It Yourself, hazlo tú misma, músico y dibujo en iniciativas autogestionadas. Este fue el punto de partida de su tesis de doctoral, una archiva del Do It Yourself, autoedición y gestión en una fanzinoteca feminista queer. Y bueno, es doctora en Bellas Artes por la Universidad de Murcia, en España, y estudió Bellas Artes en la Universidad de Castilla-La Mancha, en Cuenca. Y en 2015 realizó una estancia académica en el programa de estudios de género de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, como parte de su investigación doctoral. Okay, 1 second, we have a technical problem.
Yes.
¿Ya? De acuerdo. Y por otro lado, Iurhi Peña es una artista mexicana que se dedica a la ilustración y al diseño editorial. Que se dedica a eso, a la ilustración y al diseño editorial. Está licenciada en Artes Visuales de la UNAM. Es la editora de Baby, que es el proyecto que hoy presentan, del que ahora acaban de sacar un libro que tenemos aquí en el espacio, y también nos han hecho llegar una parte de esa archiva de fanzines, de Femzines feministas mexicanos, entre otros sitios, también de otros países latinoamericanos. Entonces vamos a abrir este paquetito que nos han mandado y ahora les doy paso a ellas.
Hello. Can you hear me? And did you open the parcel? My name is Joppe Venema, and I'm here with Gelen. I would like to share my desktop with you to show you a few photographs and pictures of our project, of what we have been doing since we first started this series. Back in 2015, both Gelen and myself, we do fanzines. That's how we met. She was working in Spain. She came over to Mexico. When we met in 2014, I think, this feminist movement was not that present in Latin America, but it's now so very strong here in Latin America. I don't know whether you're familiar with the movement. You know, there's green handkerchief struggle, very strong feminist struggle in Latin America. But at the time, in the fanzine scene, we sort of saw a boom. But I suppose this is not the case with you in Spain or in Europe, but it is commonly the case, you know, that we women, or have our works and seeing women tending to be on the outskirts, on the fringes, on the periphery, in the backstage, while men's works are at the front. So that's the context. We met, Gelen and me. Moras is girls in Mexican. And there are a lot of moras, a lot of girls doing fanzines in Mexico. It's not only me doing fanzines, it's throughout Mexico, so we then realized we had to find them by means of a call, which you can see here with the poster. We launched a call for fanzine authors, and for those of you who can't speak Spanish, the caption says, looking for fanzine authors. A lot was said about desktop publishing at the time, but from a male view, from a male approach. The goal originally was to put together a traveling exhibition, as per the slogan on the screen, traveling exhibition in A47. That was the starting point. We then put together 3 workshops held on public spaces, public squares, places other than schools. This is a photograph of one at the library. To make it more available and open to all, we would have our fanzines on display, my fanzines, Helen's fanzines, on the table, as you can see. So that was the dynamics. At some point we would have workshops, whether in the street or inside, as you can see, showing all the fanzines we had, with a view to circulating that type of knowledge. This is a photograph of a children's workshop for children aged different ages. This was fun. It was a piñata with a little monkey hanging from there, representing a patriarch society. We tore it apart and we were ever so happy. A lot of exercises or similar exercises were done, around poetry, fanzine creation, but always from a feminist perspective. This workshop was very nice. Women, would come to us and have interest in us. It was really nice. It was a way of fighting for women's rights again. So this is more or less how it worked. We also had talks. This is Helen at the time. And we did quite a few talks and presentations. And we then came up with the idea of the traveling library, which was very nice at all. This is Barcelona's Lady Fest in 2016 or 2017, I can't remember now. 2016. Says Helen, with Azucena in the photograph too. You probably know her. This is a funny picture. They don't look particularly interested in our fanzines, but I think in the north people are not that emotional in a way. They don't express their feelings that easily, but this is roughly what we did, moving around. This is Helen again. We also did a workshop on a station a television station or channel in Mexico. And we traveled to different sites, different events in 2016. This is Veracruz in Mexico, with workshops on fanzine. The archive is well received by young girls, by moras, as we say in Mexican Spanish, and women in universities would get really emotional, by this type of contents. The context where we are in Mexico is definitely different. It's not like in Spain. Violence in Mexico pervades it all. This is Ciudad Juárez, our workshop there. We had a lot of fun. Some of these women are friends of ours now. So the experience was really, really nice. This is Helen reading some fanzines, and we would do a lot of dynamics like public readings, etc.
It's very emotional, and it's also a way to give fanzines further away as books. Take them single copy. We want to share all this. We are here giving a talk. This is a drawing from Livestream in 2015. That was very interesting experience, very beautiful experience. But we want to tell you here that from all this work that we've done along this last 5-6 years, we had some support that allowed us to publish the book that you have there. You may be seeing it, I imagine that you're seeing it, I'm not sure. But we show you some pictures. And so we're here to speak about our experience, about what is doing fanzines here in Mexico City. So I give the floor now to Gelen. She can keep on telling you about this. So hello. Now I can see myself on the screen. Yes, I can show a little bit the book. I can show it to you, the one we sent there. It's the second edition, right? We made a first version, where we were showing an archive of do-it-yourself here in Barcelona. And there were many people like Iurhi and Frost traveling around, and then we presented the first edition of the book, and this would be here the second part, where we could add a little support, which was in the end very small, because, well, in the end, when one tries to publish a book, then you try to do it as cheap as possible, but Peña was asking for quotations. Iurhi, she's the graphical designer, me, myself. We did it the best we could. It was the first one. We're going to show you some pictures. We have some volumes there. You can buy it at such cheap price of 15 euros. I'm sorry, it's a bit more expensive there, but because it traveled, right? It's a collection of what we've done along all these years. And I'm going to share the image right now, so you can take a look at it. Since there's only 4 volumes there, so for you not to fight it, we're going to show you the images here. This cover here of Autoeditoras, self-publishers, we do fanzines. Iurhi and I are the fixed ones, the main ones, but it's open for everyone. This cover was made by Vaneen. She's also an illustrator, a graphic designer. She's also part of the team of Autoeditoras, and we received some support of the PAC, PAC. It's support from the government of art of here. Yes, it's the government of contemporary art. So it was also very special support aid. It was due to COVID. And the book, there's a small fanzinoteca, we call it like that. I call it a COVID fanzinoteca. It was a bit also anti-COVID, not anti-COVID, but how to survive COVID, so to say. And here we have an index of the things we put inside. There's a summary of the images here also from the Ladyfest Bibliothèque, from Juárez was the first one. We were also in Barcelona. We've also made different presentations here in Mexico. We also did some there in Europe when we traveled around in Barcelona. Here is my cat. He's a lot bigger now. He is just looking at the t-shirts we did from Autoeditoras. And here you can find a small index. And this version is a lot more ambitious. The first one was very nice, but this one with the aid, well, we got excited and we worked very much. There's a lot of work behind this publication. We did an archive, we call it Archiva in Spanish, with the feminine ending. as fanzines, we play with the words, no? With fanzine, fem from feminine, maybe in other places. I don't know if the translator is able to translate this, but yes, in English would be also fanzine. It's quite extended. So we played with the words. We changed fam to fem, making it more Spanish, speaking about fanzines made by women. We also pointed out trans and cis gender persons in all the spectra. And for this book here, we're short of time, and they told us that you're a bit tired of so many talks, so we're going to go quick. There was a small text and decalogue that I have, and I wanted to show you around the idea of fanzine, and especially about the feminist fanzine. Because as Iurhi said, now there is a great movement where there is a demand, a claim, we could even say commercial. Why not? Why not use this word of feminism? And when we began, Iurhi and I I don't know, they didn't like us. They took our tables away from festivals. They were saying, "Are you feminists like them?" They were talking to us like that. It was a bit violent. I remember some fairs where they invited us just to solve that debate that other feminist colleagues were having. And since we were already talking about that, they just called us to solve this debate. It was complicated. No? At that time, it was a bit of a bad word. And in this small text that we have here, that we wrote, we speak also about context of when we began with Autoeditoras and how complex it was, and it still is. You can read it if you have the volume. For the moment, we only have the book on paper, physical, but when we sell the copies we need, then we will upload it to the internet. It's been a lot of work behind this book. Here's one of the posters that Iurhi has shown. This one here, the drawing is from Iurhi, she's made it, I love it. We made a talk. This poster is of a talk, and we invited some colleagues, and we spoke at that time already about institutional, not institutional, punk, not punk. There was a debate, very interesting one. Even lately, I tried to mediate between both things, but if you ask me, right now, I say no institution, not institutional, please. But yeah, discourse keeps changing. So, and there is a long trajectory. This one here, this text was already in the first edition, but it's not gotten old. I read it again, I still see the beauty in it. I know the context has changed, but the ideas are still there. And then we have interviews, we invite people to do like small essays. And this one from Ruth Castro. They're all very nice. We couldn't pay very much to the authors, it was a bit symbolic, but we put on this paper at the best of our wills. So we had Alex Alonso, we interviewed many people, and it's beautiful because all these people we have seen along our trajectory, and we have almost seen each other grow. We had same objectives, same intentions. The beginning was not the same, but we had the will all together to visibilize the movement. Now it seems very common, but Iurhi and I remember when we got together 5 fanzines, and they told us, "Oh, so many fanzines from Moras, from girls, is that true?" Yeah, well, at that time, they were just saying, there aren't women in the movement, but we have forgotten about that, but it happened. There were conferences at the time, but we almost tend to forget about all these things. But this fanzine reminds us of that. We have Catalina Salazar, for example, Andrea Galaxina, with bombas para desayunar, bombs for breakfast, Lucía Argaña. She's very interesting, from Barcelona. She's from Chile, but she's worked in Barcelona. We made these t-shirts from Postporn, also the project of Mami. And here, this was a brief history, more or less, what me and Julie have told you. We find here different ways, because Archiva, the archive, is very much about the body. We speak about that in Latin America. It's a way of body embodying the fancy and making it a body. It will be the performance of the Archiva, the archive. Here we have the collection of fanzines from Avi Ayala, and here you can see the different fanzines that have come to us. And we want to show you this part, because now it's impossible to make an archive for institutions, even though it may not be possible, but it's possible. It is something very lively. They were asking me, how many fanzines do you have? Well, that many in one, which is the one I have just bought. I have no idea of how many fanzines I have, just as many as I had time and space for them. But it was a very beautiful exercise, and I want to thank Iurhi for this exercise. And because I had the opportunity to reread the fanzines and then make reviews on them and review each one of them. Maybe with the review you can convince someone to buy this fanzine. When you read their stories, you see the face of the author. And also this topic about collectionism, just having the fanzines for the sake of having them, but we also want to show this how impossible, how complex it is to create this whole archive to reach the institutions. Sometimes the institutions gather just the words, the concepts, but they do not use the body, as I said. So this way of being able to reread the fanzines, it was beautiful. We had to make the effort. We had to analyze where it was from, who was the author, if it was signed or not. It was beautiful to reread them and to re-encounter them. And it gave me some sense for. And we reached as many as we could, but the most important thing is that the work can keep developing. And it is a work that Iurhi is doing, and she's very analytical. She's uploading to internet and Instagram all the reviews and all the images of those fanzines that were not included in this book. So the new fanzines, we keep adding them to the internet or to the Archiva. Here we have reviews from different places. It's not a closed story, it's, so to say, a circular story. Now I wanted to mention something for the listeners.
De México, pero no solo del centro.
Fanzines come from Mexico, but not from the center of Mexico, but also from the north, the south. You know, Mexico is a huge territory with many peculiarities, with a long story. We have from Guadalajara, from Mérida, from everywhere, from all the states of Mexico. We also have fanzines from Peru, from Argentina, from Chile, from Colombia, Costa Rica. And we keep collecting fanzines. This is something beautiful that the project has allowed us to be able to link with other people that also do fanzines in the South, in the global South, as we call it. And the texts we ask for are texts from people that we have met along all this project, all this trajectory. And we have very strong and beautiful alliances with Peru, with Colombia, with Chile. And in a way, even though it's not to historicize, so to say, in an academical sense, it is a bit of that story of feminism and of graphical art in South America, and to connect with all these people that create their own fanzines and their own archivas, their own archives, like Peña, they have this project in Colombia. So in a way, we keep connecting, linking with other people, and we find stories throughout in the internet also. But since we didn't want to stay on the internet, we wanted to publish this book, this physical book. In the beginning, it was a bit of too much of a work, but it became some sort of a body besides our own body. You know, this book of fanzines. You can read it. Maybe you cannot have the fanzines, but at least you know that. Here you have one from Brazil, and you know that someone's speaking about all these things in different places around the world, and you can keep drawing your own story and see who did this fanzine, who's this person. I'm going to look for her or him in the internet and Instagram. Let's look for the blog or social networks. There are some alternative networks that keep happening parallel to the hegemonic ones. And another thing about the book is that it has more archives from other people, like this one from Rooney and Gelen. You can speak a little bit on this. Oh, you can come back? Yes. Blue is someone else, another person working on fanzines, working with even younger colleagues, because we're very young, right? At least in our hearts. And they are reflecting different things because they're younger. And we wanted to show all these people in the book, all these people doing things, well, to the extent that we could, because the book is finite, has limits. Maybe you can, for all those people that cannot travel to Mexico, to Latin America to see what's happening, you can read all these texts, and it's, for me, it's easier to translate now. And Gelen can speak to you about the other archivas that are within the book besides our archiva. And this is something beautiful that we could make with the book, to establish a dialogue with other people that do the same sort of exercises, practices, which are alive, so non-institutional archives, that they offer some sort of embodying. I don't know if you can translate that, but speaking about fanzines from a very specific point of view, or from a place like you, thinking about fanzines in Mexico. Okay, you may think it's okay, but it's not the same. To know that you know that happens, it's different from having a body of that and collect all these fanzines. So I believe this book is like a embodying of all parts.
That's high praise of the works, yes, and it took a big effort. We made a big effort. That's what I always try to do from the other side too, from the academy side too. Well, we'll see. Huge effort was made, and I should say there aren't many archives, but this practice has always been done from the underground scene, the fanzine scene, you know, the creating archives, exchanging archives, forging connections. We talked about the digital archive by Iurhi. We have another one by Ratalia, which we have to post on Instagram. Another one from Chile, Autoeditoras, which it's quite interesting because there is also a bicycle there that takes the archive, for the archive to travel, and it also entails other ways of archiving. You know, we could talk for years on end, and we don't have long to go. But if I may, I would like to continue with the images. This is in Spanish. There are a lot of images in there, and we also have another example, Fanzines desde el encierro, fanzines from lockdown. This was partially funded due to COVID, to the pandemic, but fanzine was a really nice tool during the lockdown, and of course before the lockdown too. I always say, you know, it's a way of communicating from the fringes, from the outskirts, for you to connect with other people, and so many fanzines emerge from that place, from the surprising factor, from what we were coping with at a global level. This is a compilation of texts by bookshop, La Resi. La Resi is also a publisher of fanzines. Not only a bookshop, they published this little book, this booklet, which was quite nice, including these fanzines. This is a sample, a selection, but I also included a few more. This is a fanzine in English. This is another one based on our experiences. And to finish with a little poem, which I would like to read out, because it's so nice. Let me read it out to you. This is the ending of Femzines, for a new story to begin. We talked, we wrote, we drew, we danced, we vomited. Tell me who you are with, and I'll tell you who you are. You are not alone, you are surrounded by all. This is it so far. The archive is never ending. It's a bit of a poem, you know, and it includes Mexican terms, and the vomit term has a bit of an explanation. Iurhi had a fanzine which included that word, and as happened with the first text, and about the context at the time which we went through. Sorry for the confusion. It's already 20 to 8. We shall close to make room for questions, but if I may, I would like to show you the text I showed you at the beginning. The text contextualizes the situation where it all began when we launched the book in 2015, when we met, and then the demonstration on March the Earth in 2021. If you remember, we were not supposed to go out in the streets due to the pandemic, and the feminists were put the blame for COVID-19. So we're so evil, aren't we feminist women? I remember that time was really vibrating. Let me read out to you. There are many feminists in the streets, women with hoods, radical women, feminine women. Many of them went to march, went to the demonstration. Sometimes things are upside down, if you know what I mean. You know, we were supposed to do something to help each other, to make things more visible, but politics interferes and things change when white feminists and white feminism reaches politics. We are faced with a few problems, aren't we? I remember the time, and I talked about this with Peña and Iurhi, that causes some disturbance and comfort, and some colleagues from our collective took sides too. But this is something we need to live with, we need to understand, and so we thought it interesting to note it down, to notice that type of confrontation between different feminist movements and within the feminist movement. At the end there is a poem in this text about the way we file fanzines. We would say, in this case, there are some fanzines in this archive that are not that comfortable anymore in this collection. Or the archive is pancaking, or is alive and kicking. It's always in motion, it's always growing. And I thought this was a very nice text, and that's why I'm telling you about it. And there is another thing about the moment being described as a time not for celebration, because when I was driving my car, I saw a billboard which read, "Do not have parties while you drive," or in your car, which I found quite striking. But in the end, the message is for us to be back again, up again, sharing and keeping each other company. And here we are. We are far, the book is there with you, we sent it to you, and this is it. And if Laura agrees, I will now stop sharing my desktop, and we could give the floor to the audience, if that's okay with you. If I may, I would like to show you what Helen told you a minute ago. In the book, we cover up to 2020, but we keep receiving fanzines and we keep buying and exchanging fanzines, which means fanzine production is not done yet, is ongoing. So if you cannot get the book, we have this little file here on Instagram, and you can browse on it. It does not include all the fanzines, but you can see the most recently produced fanzines and those released recently, and I think it's quite nice to be able to share it in colors. So you can have a look, you can browse around and see what is being done now, and then you can go and visit the sites of those of the artists, like this one. She's very cool, this artist here, but there are many other artists too, and authors. But we try to show all those things that are of interest to us, or that are more aligned with us. Well, please, I encourage you to have a look, to browse and see how the process is moving on. We're ever so happy to share it with you. Now that our book is completed, we are history. We made it. I don't know if that's good or bad, but this is it. It's good. Okay. Shall I stop sharing my slides? We can leave it. Laura?
Yes.
Or Laura? Are there any questions?
Yes, there are. There is.
We can ask ourselves questions.
There is a question. Sorry.
Please let me know. Okay, I'm going to ask a question.
No.
Iurhi.
Okay, I have a question. Of course, I know that Spanish is one of the 4 biggest languages on the world. But for a Dutch guy like me, it's very normal to speak and control 2 languages. In my case, Dutch and English. And I feel I know a very little Spanish, but it's impossible for me to understand in these Spanish zines. And I'm wondering if you don't have the need to not only reach Spanish speaking or Spanish reading audience, but also people who don't control Spanish. So it would be nice if I can understand what I'm not only looking at, but also what I'm reading.
Or the small difference.
Yuri, ¿tú la escuchaste bien?
La escuché cortada.
Iurhi, did you hear the question? It was broken down.
Okay, in short again, then, in short. You would reach a much, Spanish is the 4th language, I think, in the world. So you have a great audience, you have a big audience, but there's a lot of people who don't speak or read Spanish. So I don't understand what is in these zines. And don't you feel the urge to also publish in English? Something I do, for instance, if I write a poem or whatever, I both do it in Dutch and English.
Claro. Sí, puede ser, solo que ya no tenemos dinero.
Yes, but we run out of money to publish our version in English. But when we get the money, when we get the funding, we could publish in English. Thank you.
Clear.
No.
Maak je zin dan af?
Well, I don't think it's not the issue of having money, it's about controlling 2 languages. So if you speak not only Spanish, but also, and you can also write English and speak English, you can make a bilingual zine, so that makes it understandable for a much bigger audience.
That you need a translation or a translator.
No.
Sí, pero necesitas.
Which of course you have to.
Ik bedoel, ik kan toch Engels en Nederlands?
Yeah, but that's not always the case in other parts.
¿El qué? ¿Por qué? ¿Qué ha pasado? Yo no me enteré.
Iurhi is repeating the question. May I answer the question?
But since we launched learning,
there is an introduction to that. In the study of the genre, obviously we are highly influenced by English as a language, because English is the language used in research. But we had an ulterior motive too in publishing in Spanish. We wanted fanzines in Spanish to be more visible, because people seem to think or understand that the most fanzine artists came from the English-speaking world. So with the money we got for the first edition, we decided to go for Spanish. Of course, I buy and I get a lot of books and fanzines in English, and I have used them as my source material, so English is there in a way too. And of course, there are funds, dedicated funds that can be used for translation. Of course, we are not against translating fanzines, but we are trying to pay attention to a particular area, particular region in the world. And of course, in Spain you have fanzines in other languages, Catalonian, Basque, Galician. Some of those languages I don't understand. Those fanzines are there, published in those languages, but they are part of the archive. Of course, we are not against publishing in English. The bigger our audience, the better, but so far we are creating Latin American archive, and translating is expensive, you probably know, and it's work and it needs to be paid. And of course, I would very much like to do it, but so far, we are focused on Spanish. In the future, we will do things in English too.
That's not my point, but I think in this discussion we will not really get it clear. What I want to express, that is, in the Netherlands it's quite normal to control and speak at least 2 languages, and you can write and read 2 languages. So you don't need a translator or funds to translate. And I fully understand, of course, that you want Spanish to be not dominated by English, as I don't want Dutch to be dominated by English. But for instance, coming Saturday I will do a performance, but I already take into account that I might do it both in English and Dutch, because the chances are big that there are people visiting the performance who won't understand Dutch. So I have to take into account that I also produce it in English. That's my whole point, and I was wondering, because I don't think from a Dutch perspective it's not strange that if you produce a zine that you do it bilingual on your own, not by funding, not by hiring translators. But that's the whole point.
Bueno, también si, bueno, lo que dicen que no es real, también
it's real. We can speak English. It's not a problem for us not to write in English, but at this moment in time in my life, I'd rather publish in Spanish than in English. And yes, I understand your point, definitely, but people who go there, who travel there, it's a lot of foreigners there in Holland, or there aren't many foreigners here in where I am, and from my perspective it's not that interesting for these to travel abroad.
como que un poco nos invitaron a esta charla como para presentar.
They invited us this talk to present what we're doing in Latin America, but I'm particularly interested in the Latin American territory, basically, or the Mexican, Chicano territory as people from the United States, or at the United States from Mexico. But it could be a way of doing over there in Europe. Maybe we here do not want to do it that way.
There's another question.
Point. Want to read the English-speaking audience, and we will take that into account.
Better in English or in Spanish? They can also be translated. Hola, bueno, gracias por la charla.
Hi, well, thank you for your talk.
I'm so weird. Don't translate that. Okay. No. Les quería preguntar.
I wanted to ask you.
Si hay personas, bueno, por lo que ahora comentaron es que están muy interesados en colaborar y no solo con personas de México, pero con personas de otros continentes del mundo. ¿Cómo pueden estas personas, cómo se manejan? ¿Se contactan con ustedes? ¿Ustedes las encuentran, las seleccionan? ¿Cómo es este proceso como de colaboración con nuevas personas que también tienen iniciativas fanzines y feministas?
Feminist initiatives, fanzines, etc. Should I answer, Iurhi? Yes. Truth is, it's very vivacial, so it comes from the experience, and when you have the same intentions, the same will, you have the same interests, that you meet along the way. There are talks, workshops, fanzines where you join together, you meet with the same topic, places, comes hand with hand, and travels over oceans, reaches many places. It just happens. I wouldn't force it. And we have also Instagram. People write to us throughout Instagram. We have social networks. I go to Spain. For example, next week I will take some volumes there. They're just circulating around. Laura is also taking it there. And the world is very small in the end. If we have common interests, then in the end we meet each other. But we do not select. Now it just comes naturally. That's why I was saying that life selects us. It finds us because some fanzines that came in, are not in the same context, people that came as feminists and are called now in a different way. Even the concept of feminist concepts change names or anti-racist, communitarian, etc. Life joins us together. It happens that way, but we do not select. Is that true, Iurhi? It just arrives, it comes naturally. Well, I think it's a project which is based in Latin America and Mexico, and we work basically with people from Mexico and Latin America. And as Gelen has said, people, as Gelen travels, for example, she's here and then she's there, and since we are in many places, we meet each other. But we are not a civil association, we're just two people. We keep meeting other people. So if you want to collaborate with us, you can write to us, but it's not an institution of self-publishing. We're just friends who did a book around things that they liked. And we're open to do many things, of course, but we're not an authority, and we don't want to be. So if you want to speak to us, then come to us. It's that way. And you can write to us, and it's a bit localized. Yes, it's already done. You can see it even in the name, but sometimes that would be a new debate, but it's easy to contact us. We have a common will of having an archive from Latin America. I travel around, but the intention of Autoeditoras mainly is to have it localized with the Latin American fanzines within a common intention, which is the feminist intention. Maybe the name will change in the future, I'm not sure. Let's see where life takes us, but this is where we are now. Maybe made by women. I liked it very much as you did it in Baby Crazy, this polishing house, Baby Crazy. How you did it, Iurhi, it was great. Yes. So people outside had material or just doing drawings. That's how we called it.
Gelen, Iurhi. Por aquí ya hemos sacado ahora las preguntas y nada, solo quería agradeceros muchísimo que habéis participado, estuvo súper interesante. Seguiremos echando aquí un vistazo al libro que estará expuesto toda esta semana y este fin de semana habrá un mercado de fanzines también, entonces seguiré compartiendo las vivencias y los sentidos por aquí. Y nada, muchísimas gracias y es un placer que hayáis dedicado vuestro tiempo a estar aquí. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you. Thank you. With another line, another place. Bye. See you. Bye.